I wonder if tonight, because we're going to be talking, I don't know whether it's nanomils or mils or nanometers or whatever the measurement is, but I wonder if by the end of the night we're going to go back to, numbers being woke. I wonder if that's going to be the summary of tonight's show. Your numbers are woke, but numbers are numbers. Yeah, but they're woke because I don't like them. Maybe. Mind you, we should probably be more professional and apparently less biased, Chewie, to be sitting in the centre and saying, I wonder what this interview will be about. But look, let me tell you, what it'll be about is about the things we already knew, many people have already talked about, and to be honest, things that we need to keep getting told to make sure we can address the issues that come out with it. So in saying all of that, from AUT, which is now Auckland University of Technology, let's welcome to the show Dr. Alex Plum. Alex, welcome to the madness.
Thank you for having me.
I've got a lot of feelings about this, but let's get to your article on the conversation. Let me show it to the whānau so everyone knows what's going on. This is your article on the conversation. Māori face harsher sentences than New Zealand Europeans for similar drink driving offences with lasting consequences. Recent analysis from the Understanding Policy Delivery Program has already shown systemic bias at the policing stage, where all other factors are held constant. Māori were 11% more likely to be prosecuted than Pākehā. Like I said, I didn't want to be dismissive, but this is not a new phenomenon. Here's an article from, I think, 2018, 2019. Māori imprisoned at twice the rate of Europeans for the same crime. So in saying that, this is not a new idea, or this is not has not been seen in the data before. Tell us about looking specifically at the drink driving results and what that began to show us when it comes to Māori and European New Zealanders being treated in the courtrooms.
Yes, that's a good point. So there's a long discussion about that Māori are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So that's nothing anyone kind of denies. The question behind is, do they actually, what is the underlying reason for this difference? And is the difference still there if we try to figure out similar offenses? And finding similar offenses is actually pretty tricky, even in cases, for example, you have a minor assault, the interpretation of a minor assault, how does the victim feel about it might be differing. So there's a bit of gray area still there where you can argue, oh yeah, okay, so there might be in some cases somehow comparable, but they might be still different, so you can't really compare each other. And that is a bit of the beauty of these drink driving and we try to use, because drink driving cases, you have a reading, so there's a level written down how much you were over the limit, and that's kind of the point we try to say, okay, these are in front of the court, in the eyes of the court, actually pretty much very identical offenses, and there's not much to discuss about whether they are different. They are actually pretty similar.
So what you're saying, and I want to bring up another part of the article, what you're saying is, if there was no person in the courtroom, if this was just the data and nothing else, if there wasn't a person to look at, it would be difficult to find a big disparity between the crimes.
That would be our expectation. So there's always the data doesn't cover everything. That's one of the limitations. So the one limitation we do not know is, for example, if the offender had a wish to go for a different sentence. That can always happen, and that's something we cannot observe. It is something there might be questions around why does a offender want to receive a more serious sentence. So because it normally goes with more negative effects along, in the sense of it is also recorded and it's in your criminal record, and it is written there that you have this higher sentence received. So there are downsides of going there. So there's a bit of room still left about what happened actually, but it shouldn't be too far away, especially if we just account for more aspects when we look at the persons themselves and when we assume, okay, they have similar or almost identical economic backgrounds, so they are better off, they are employed and stuff like that. This also impacts the likelihood and the expectation of the outcome. And there you kind of expect, okay, if everything is very much the same across so many dimensions, then we should also see pretty much no differences in the outcomes.
You speak of the way that you tried to maybe get rid of some of the bias or some of the unknowns. In the actual report, you say we focused on first-time drink driving cases using alcohol readings, which is just what you've been talking about, as an objective, standardized measure of offence severity. Our core question: do Māori face a higher likelihood of a community-based sentence instead of the more common and least severe outcome of a fine? The results suggested they do. Did the results suggest at any place why they do, or just that observe that they do?
So our strategy was in the end to, in a certain way, find a doppelganger in a copy. So you have a European and you try to find a copy of that European in the data of the Maori, in
Yep.
the sense of they have similar backgrounds economically and family-wise, driver license-wise, and all the factors. So in those sentences, I just gave a very brief description. We have a much, much longer list of restrictions we place. So it's a first-time drink driving offender. They don't have any additional offenses. They were in the country for a certain period. They didn't have a hospitalization at that date. So we could rule out that there were any other factors kind of at play at this specific offense date, which could have impacted the sentencing. And therefore,
So what I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you engineered it so that the participants you were comparing were as close as they could be to being the same.
yeah.
Although we acknowledge it can never be perfect, but would this data be the first time that researchers have engineered this to try and be as close as they can?
I'm not aware of any study that tries to get as close as we have, because we have in New Zealand this unique setting where we have access to a lot of different data sets and combine them. So we have access, for example, to inland revenue data set where we know the employment history and whether also to MSD about benefit uptake. And we have the whole history of prior court charges. So, and in this case, we exclude everyone who had anything prior which impacted it. And therefore, I guess there are some cases and some other studies, and often these studies, they look more into serious sentences, serious offenses, because their judges have larger discretionary. They can decide what type of sentence they are taking.
Mm-hmm.
But in our case, we are going deliberately for a very common offense, because it's on the one side widespread, but also because there's a certain default sentence which is used, and to see whether there's still variation happening, because it is, in our view, kind of the most objective way of finding those very similar persons.
Chewie, jump in, sir. Thoughts and feelings.
So this seems to me another block in the study, the big study that was done on systemic harshness of sentences towards non-Europeans. But this, you've gone even deeper still to find an identical sort of crime and something that is measurable, such as the blood alcohol content, and you've found a really clear correlation there.
In the correlation, in which sense? You mean?
Oh, that there, you've mentioned that there's sorry if I didn't catch this correctly, 11% harsher sentences for Māori for essentially the same offence.
the numbers are a bit different because the 11% they refer to a prior study about policing. They were in that case
okay.
they were more likely to prosecute. In our case, the raw data is about a gap of 3 times higher, and then when you control for all these factors, which makes a difference because Maori offenders are on average younger, they are living in more deprived areas, and when you try to filter out all these factors which might impact the sentencing, then you still get a difference of 2 times, which is 100% more likely
Right.
to receive
okay.
a more serious sentence compared to a New Zealand European.
I think I can actually read that, but I've got it highlighted to read next from the article. A clear pattern emerges. Our results show that despite having similar alcohol levels at the time of offending, 9.9% of Māori offenders received a community-based sentence compared with 3.3% of New Zealand Europeans. We also found Māori offenders are on average younger and more often parents, more often female, and more likely to live in a highly deprived neighbourhood. Our analysis controlled for offence characteristics and a range of demographic and socioeconomic factors, but even after these adjustments, Māori remain twice as likely as New Zealand Europeans to receive a community-based sentence. And the article talks about lasting consequences near the end here, and I won't read it out verbatim, but you talk about a younger person who is just getting started in the workforce. So if you're likely to get a more serious conviction that goes on your record, that might impede your ability to get a job, that might impede your ability to go up the work rank. So there are long-lasting effects from these convictions that Māori are receiving disproportionately to Europeans. Yes?
Correct. I think that's kind of very crucial to keep in mind about conviction and sentencing. So it's not just that you receive it and you just have to pay your fine, or you to have your community sentence and do those hours. It is something that, and I think it's really important to keep in mind, is that it is in your criminal record, and future employer can look into it, and background checks are very common and often done. And even if it's not really immediately related, it sends a signal to future employers, and especially also nowadays where we have a very tight labor market. So we have a lot of applicants for few jobs, and then there's a sorting going on. The employer sees these different applications, and each of these ones give another signal, and it's one signal whether you have a conviction, but it's also a signal when you have these different types of conviction, what type of conviction you and what type of sentence you received, and that might make it even more challenging on the labor market.
When I hear politicians, political commentators, YouTubers, old men on Facebook say things like, oh, there's no such thing as privilege. We're all the same. We all get treated the same, and everywhere there's no one starts off behind the 8 ball. This to me would be an absolutely dictionary definition example of what many people would call white privilege. Because what it seems that you're saying is really the only difference could well be a Māori name and maybe a brown face versus a European face. And if that's the only difference, that means that European face is getting a better outcome, is privileged in this area when it comes to the justice system.
One thing we have to add here is when we look at the district courts and we looked at how things are in different groups of district courts, it is something that we do not see systematically across all district courts. So we have a certain pocket which drives this result. There are a lot of district courts where the differences are much smaller. So the default of a fine is handed out for almost everyone, and we see much less differences across ethnicities. But there are few district courts where and these district courts, they have one thing in common. They provide these more serious sentences in general more frequent, and then also on top of it more often to Maori, so which kind of creates an even larger gap between those ones. So it is nothing we can say there's a systemic difference across all district courts. So there seems to be more related to specific ones.
I mean, we've all heard anecdotal stories the whole time. A colleague of mine, friend of mine, Michelle Acourt, comedian, her daughter is part Māori, has a Māori name, and Michelle would go along to flat meetings when she was about to get her daughter was looking for a new flat. She tells a story on a podcast I did with her. And so Michelle would go with her daughter because the daughter has a Māori name, and the landlord was like, oh, nice middle-class white woman, this kid must be okay. So, this kind of discriminatory things we've heard of from so long before, and this, as you're saying, the systemic racism and bias that's in places like arresting. I wonder, and you don't have to have an opinion on this, Dr. Plum, being an academic, we're just a couple of radio clowns from Dunedin, but I wonder if we could, people watching right now, get these numbers to Mr. Seymour, because he seems to always want to make things all equal based on race. And this is probably an area that if he did choose to make it equal based on race, it might actually be a positive rather than a negative. I don't really have a question in that, Alex. I'm just sort of thinking about what this means for the country. Well, what does it mean for the country? What does it mean moving forward? What do we need to do, those of us who accept these results and can see the problems within the system?
That's a really good and really tricky question, I think. It's it has a bit of this legal sphere where I'm not a legal scholar. So it's kind of the one thing we need to keep in mind is like we need this consistency, and things need to be, and I think should be acknowledged by everyone, things needed to be looked at independently of the ethnicity of a person. And that's the ideal case where we want to move to. But I guess also we have to reflect on our understanding of how we do punishment in general, or how we consider punishment and this system in general, because we are very open and very transparent about convictions and sharing this information to the labor market, and it can create much harm. So this is one thing I heard so often with so many people about things happening when they were young, and the record entry, it doesn't disappear very quickly. And therefore, I guess we need a general discussion of, is the way we think about crime and how we want to tackle it and deal with offenders, is it in the best interest for the offender and for society? And what is kind of like more the long-term idea behind reintegration and giving persons a second chance, and not to have a too long scarring effect of situations? Or
Mr. Luxon has been saying recently it's time for the country to have grown-up conversations around various things. Perhaps, Chewie, we need to have a bit of a grown-up conversation about this issue as well. Alex, thank you for joining us tonight. Chewie, have you got anything you want to wrap up with? Questions, comments for Dr. Plum?
No, nothing specific. Sorry, Pat.
Alex, it's been a great pleasure having you on tonight. The research that you've done now, is this like a step one, and what does it go to next for you when it comes to looking into these issues? Is there more research bouncing off the back of this, or is this like a one and done, and this is now out in the public and for people to use?
So it's actually the first step of a second one, and it will take a bit, because my second step, which is kind of like the prologue, or is it epilogue? I think it's epilogue, or the next story after that. It's looking into the labor market consequences and seeing whether we find, like, how does having a conviction shape it? And we can here look into similar trajectories when we have something around someone who just have a violation just above the limit, so very small violation. How much does it actually change the labor market trajectory, and what are the drivers for changes in employment and earnings? So
well, Alex, anything else that you find out, and any more research that you do, any more data that you've got out there? You've got our contact details now. We'd love to have you on again. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to have a chat about this, what I think is a very serious issue, and quite emblematic of a bigger, broader issue within our New Zealand society. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best. Catch you later.
Thank you.